states do this. We probably have the most diverse election state in the United States, because most states, for example, on the East Coast only have the state and cities involved in the elections. They don't have counties. And then on the East Coast, or on the West Coast rather, they have counties in the state and cities aren't involved in the elections. For example, the counties run the elections. Well, in Michigan, as you know, we have the counties, the cities, the villages, the townships, and the state, all of us involved in elections. I actually think our system is the best, because you really
that's good.
Well, yeah, of course it is. Because we have such a great check and balance.
Right.
You have the local election officials who actually administrate the election that day. And then it goes to the Board of Canvassers, which is the county. So then they check it and recount it again. And then from there it goes to the state, where the State Board of Canvassers also goes through the process and certifies the election. So you really have a three-step process to make sure that everything was done fairly and accurately. So it's really, I think, probably the best system out there.
Okay. Now there's a lot of exciting ideas and things that you're working on. What do you see in the horizon? Any new topics that you're going to tackle?
Well, on election side, or
maybe both.
Well, a couple of things. One on the election side that I'd like to do is that I've noticed in my branch offices, when you're 16 years old, everybody comes in, they're excited to see me, they have their parents with them, and of course they want their new driver's license, right? So I usually, come up to some of them and go, "Happy birthday," and they look at me like, "How does she know it's my birthday?" Well, I'm pretty sure they're not coming on the day after their birthday to get their driver's license.
No, they want their license.
They want their license. So then I noticed at 18, when it's time for them to register to vote, I don't have them all lining up in my office to come in and register to vote. And so one of the suggestions we've offered to the legislature is, why don't we pre-register the 16-year-olds so that when they become 18, it'll just be activated. Then they'll know that they can participate in the election. One of the other issues is, in Michigan, of course, we have the rule that you have to actually register in person to get your first absentee ballot. So if you registered non-in-person, which a lot of students do through voter registration drives, unfortunately they get to college, then they can't get an absentee ballot. I get a lot of parents on the phone who are not happy with that, and I agree with them. And so this way they would be registered in person so they could vote absentee once they go to college, which I think will be very helpful and hopefully encourage them more to participate and get involved in the process of elections. So that's one of the ideas we have. So we're working on that. We're also looking at, of course, the future with elections. Where is that going? Is there more things we can do on the internet? For example, one of the things that we've done is we've now merged the voter file with the vehicle file. So when you come in and get your driver's license, your signature automatically now goes into the voter file, so the local clerks have access to it. And also, if you move in Michigan now, we automatically transfer your voter file with your vehicle file, so that you don't have to re-register again in order to vote in the new area where you've moved. And so the next thing we want to do is to put applications for absentee ballots online.
Oh yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, since we don't need your signature anymore, because we now have that electronically, there's no reason why you just can't electronically ask for an absentee ballot and do it that way. So that's one of the other things that we're working on.
Would that take care of kind of the problem with mailing out all these applications early?
Right.
That clerks have heard about and stuff like that.
Right. It'd be a huge savings for the local clerks, and also for the overseas voters or the military too, because the time frames always get so short that one process would be eliminated, and they'd hopefully be able to get their ballot on a timely manner.
Okay. Well, that kind of leads us into this next topic, the presidential primary. Maybe you could just start by giving us a little historical perspective on primaries and presidential primaries here in Michigan.
Yeah, it's been a struggle, I'll tell you, from the election side. And I think from the voter side, too, as it keeps moving, the date moves. Most of these presidential campaigns all center around New Hampshire. New Hampshire wants to be the first. In fact, it's in their laws that they have to be the first. And then, of course, Iowa has their
When you
caucus.
say it's in their laws, is it in the
state law?
Actual state law.
Right.
Okay.
In New Hampshire, they passed a law that said they have to be first. And what they did was, can you imagine?
Could Michigan do that?
You could if you wanted to.
We will be first.
And they gave the power to the Secretary of State, who happens to be Bill Gardner, who I happen to know. I met at many of our meetings and so forth. But he actually has the power to set the date. So unlike Secretary of State here in Michigan, where I have to get the legislature to approve the date and the governor to sign it, the bill, he actually gets to set the date. So what he does is he watches where everybody else sets their dates and then sets it after that. In fact, we were kind of a little bit of a problem to him with this whole issue of our date, because he had to wait until we had set our date before he could set his. And of course, he's now set his for January 8th.
Okay.
So he's going to go ahead with that. Now, you got to remember, their state's a little smaller than ours,
Right.
about 600,000 voters, so they can implement.
Versus how many in this state?
Well, about 10 million here in
Okay.
the state of Michigan, yeah. So they can do it a little more quickly than we can. But anyway, so now it's kind of all over the map. Every state set it at a different time. The Secretaries of States Association, we actually have an idea that we think is pretty good on solving this issue, and that's to have what we call regional primaries.
Yeah, I agree. I've heard about this. This is a good idea.
So with the East Coast, the South, the West, each region would one time go first, and we'd rotate that. And I think it'd be great for the voters too, and also for the candidates, because they could then spend their time in a region,
Yes.
spread their money over in the media buys, which would cross over to states, and then they could have those elections. Now, the issue, of course, is would it be constitutional if Congress passed that or not? Because
And that's what would have to happen. Federally,
Right.
they would have to do it. Okay.
yeah, and the states could come up with an agreement amongst themselves, and that has also been a subject that people have talked about. They could come up with a compact between states. To get all 50 states to agree on something would be challenging, I would think.
Yes, right.
But that's also a way to go at that. But we just think the system right now is just not working very well for the voters. So we were hoping that they could look at this regional primary.
But you think that'll happen at a congressional or senatorial situation? You think they'll pass something then, or?
Well, first we have to get to the two parties to agree to it, and that would have to happen at the Democrat National Committee and, of course, the Republican National Committee. And both those would have to come to a consensus with the party folks first before you went to Congress, obviously. But, again, that's been a challenge too. The Democrat National Committee, they have very strict rules about primaries. You have to have what they call a closed primary, meaning you have to identify whether you're Republican or Democrat before you can vote in their primary.
And that's a really important point to maybe help the viewers understand this, why they will be in our primary
Right.
asking for a particular ballot. And it
Right.
really goes to that national rule that the Democrats have. That's right.
Right, yeah, exactly. And the Republicans don't have that rule. You can have what they call an open primary where anyone can vote in either side. So what they came up with Michigan is kind of a compromise, is that nobody will be registering as a Republican or Democrat ahead of time. You don't have to do that. What will happen is when you come into the polling place on January 15th, you'll be asked by the clerk if you want a Democrat or Republican ballot. Now, you'll take which one you want, you'll vote that, and it'll be counted. Now, the state of Michigan is not going to keep a record of that, so there won't be any public record of that. But the political parties each are going to get their list. They're going to get who voted Republican and who voted Democrat. So that will be on that, and you'll never be on a permanent list, and this is only a one-time issue. So
Right.
the next presidential election, there'll be a whole new set of rules on how that's going to work. But this was the only way, as you know, that the legislature and the parties could come to an agreement on it so that the Democrats would participate.
Now, one thing that I'm not sure maybe the viewers really understand are these rules. I mean, why can't I just change the rules at the national level? How do the Democrats have rules like that? Can you maybe expound upon that? Because that is a very difficult concept to understand.
Yeah, the Democrat National Committee is made up a little bit the same as the Republicans, but it's a little larger. I think they have more members.
Right.
They have members from each state. To be honest, I'm not sure for how many from each state that actually sit on the National Committee. And then they have an executive committee of the Democratic National Committee, and then that executive committee decides how the primary systems are going to go in the states and what delegates they'll accept. Because if they don't accept the process that you held the election, they won't accept your delegates at the National Convention. And that's the key. You can hold all the primaries you want, but if you don't follow their rules, they won't seat your delegates at the convention.
Right.
And that's really the bottom line. Now, on the Republican side, we do it a little differently. We have one Republican and one woman and one man. Of course, they're Republican. One woman and one man who are elected to the National Committee along with the state party chairman. So there's 3 from each state. And then our party's rules are set on how primaries are run at our national convention. So when our convention meets every 4 years, they set the rules on how primaries can be held in the states so that they'll accept their delegates for the next convention. Now that's a little limiting. To be honest, as a Republican, I wish they had an executive committee like the Democrats did that could just meet, you know, during the 4-year term. But no, they only do it once at the national convention. So that's something that is going to come up at the national convention about changing that. I don't know if that's going to happen, but they are going to discuss that at the national convention. So that's really how this works. I mean, it's a party